Hello everyone, and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful Gossips 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. For years, the truth had been buried, tucked away in the shadows of scandal, misdirection, and whispered family secrets that no one dared confront, a truth that could shatter the foundations of the Forrester empire and upend the lives of everyone in Los Angeles. And yet, as Brooke Logan stood in the grand, sunlit hallway of Forrester Creations, her hand trembling on the edge of her daughter Hope's latest fashion design, she knew that the moment of reckoning had arrived. The moment when she could no longer carry the weight of deceit alone. The moment when a lifetime of lies would finally spill out in a confession that could either destroy her family or finally bring the kind of redemption she had longed for since the day Hope was born. And it had been a long and tortured journey to this point. A journey marked by betrayals, near misses, and heart-stopping confrontations, from the moment she had first discovered the tangled web of affairs and hidden adoptions, to the nights spent lying awake in the Forrester mansion, haunted by the idea that the daughter she loved so fiercely might not be entirely who she had always thought she was. And as she looked at Hope, radiant and unsuspecting, balancing sketches and swatches with the effortless elegance that had always seemed to be her birthright, Brooke felt a swell of maternal pride, mingled with a piercing anxiety that made her heart pound as though it were warning her to step carefully, to measure each word, because once spoken, this secret could not be taken back, could not be softened or hidden under layers of polite conversation. It was a revelation that would ripple across the Forrester family, striking at Ridge, at Steffi, at Liam, at Thomas, at everyone whose loyalties, ambitions, and hearts had been tangled together in 1,000 dramas over decades. And Brooke's mind raced as she rehearsed the words in her head, each syllable heavy with the weight of truth. That Hope, the golden girl who had been the center of so many battles and dreams, the one who had been pushed and pulled, adored and criticized, celebrated and pitted, was not merely the daughter of Ridge and Taylor, as everyone had believed, but carried in her bloodline, in her very essence, the legacy of the Forresters themselves, the real Forresters, a fact that had been carefully concealed, misinterpreted, and manipulated by those who wanted to control power, prestige, and the future of the fashion empire. And as Brooke stepped closer, her hands clasped tightly to keep them from shaking, she saw Hope look up, her eyes filled with the unfiltered hope and trust that only a daughter could give. And in that instant Brooke realized that the timing was perfect yet terrifying, because Hope was on the cusp of launching her own collection, of staking her claim as more than just a Forrester by name, but a Forrester by blood and vision. And Brooke's confession would not merely rewrite family history. It would redefine the very fabric of the company, its succession, its legacy, and the intricate personal relationships that had been painstakingly cultivated for decades. And with a deep, shuddering breath that felt like it might tear her chest apart, Brooke began to speak, her voice trembling yet steady, the words carrying the culmination of years of secrecy, guilt, and unspoken love. Hope, there's something I've kept from you, something that's been hidden for far too long. Something about who you really are, about your family, your bloodline, your legacy. Hope, you are the real Forrester. And the words hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy and undeniable, and Hope froze, the sketches slipping slightly from her hands as if gravity itself had shifted in the room, and her eyes widened in shock, disbelief etched across her features, because the idea that she, Hope Logan, had been living her entire life under a carefully constructed illusion, that her identity had been manipulated, her place in the family questioned, was almost too much to bear. And she took a staggered step back, her mind racing to reconcile the loving mother she had always known with the magnitude of the revelation she had just received. And Brooke, seeing the storm of emotion flicker across her daughter's face, felt her own heart twist, knowing that this confession would ignite battles she could barely predict, that Ridge, Taylor, Steffi, and Liam would all respond in ways that could either unite them or tear them apart irreparably, because family secrets in Los Angeles were never just personal, they were public spectacles, weaponized by those who sought advantage, manipulated by those who thrived on chaos. And Brooke, who had seen the rise and fall of empires, the betrayals and reconciliations, the heartbreak and triumph, knew that the revelation that Hope was the real Forrester was not merely a personal confession but a seismic shockwave that would hit every corner of their world, from the boardroom of Forrester Creations to the intimate dinners where alliances were tested, from the fashion runways where reputations were made to the bedrooms where love and trust had been quietly negotiated over years of whispered arguments and fleeting reconciliations. And as Brooke watched Hope struggle to process the enormity of what she had just learned. She thought of the countless times she had stood in front of mirrors, rehearsing how she would deliver this moment, never certain if she had the courage to follow through, never certain if the truth would heal or harm, and now, with Hope staring at her, a mixture of shock, confusion, and raw emotion playing across her face, Brooke realized that there was no turning back, that this was the culmination of everything she had done, loved, sacrificed, and feared, and she braced herself for the tidal wave of reactions that were inevitable, from Ridge's silent fury and protective instinct to Steffi's jealousy and ambition, from Liam's confusion and loyalty to Thomas's opportunistic scheming, from the extended Forrester clan to the employees who had long treated Hope as a symbol rather than a person, all converging on this single, shattering truth. And as Hope's hands came up to cover her mouth, stifling a gasp that was half disbelief and half awe, Brooke saw the flicker of understanding in her daughter's eyes, the dawning realization that this revelation was not just about who she was, but about the power, responsibility, and legacy that she now carried, a legacy that had been hidden, obscured, and denied to her for years, and Brooke felt both relief and fear, relief that the truth was finally out, that the burden of secrecy was lifted, and fear that the consequences would be as dramatic and unforgiving as the decades of drama that had defined their family. And in that charged, electric moment, as time seemed to stretch and compress around them, as the sunlight from the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Forrester mansion glinted off the sketches and fabric swatches, Brooke knew that their world had shifted irrevocably, that alliances would be tested, rivalries inflamed, love challenged, and identities questioned, and as Hope finally found her voice, a whisper trembling, with emotion and wonder asking, You mean, I'm really a Forrester?" Brooke nodded, tears brimming in her eyes, because affirmation was not enough. It was the weight of the truth that mattered, the acknowledgement of a reality that had been hidden for too long, and as Hope sank into her mother's embrace, sobs mingling with laughter, with disbelief, with a dawning pride, Brooke realized that while the path forward would be turbulent, fraught with conflict, ambition, and heartbreak, the truth had set them free, and in the chaotic, glamorous, high-stakes world of Los Angeles, where fashion, family, and legacy collided in endless drama, this revelation, that Hope was the real Forrester, would be the defining moment, the spark that ignited new passions, new rivalries, and new alliances, a revelation that would echo through the halls of Forrester Creations, the hearts of the family, and the lives of everyone who had been touched by the Logan Forrester saga. And as Brooke pulled back, looking into Hope's eyes, she knew that this secret, long buried, long hidden, long feared, was finally, gloriously, and irreversibly out in the open. The moment Brooke's words landed like a lightning strike across the Forrester mansion, silence fell over the room, a tense, almost sacred silence that was quickly punctuated by the sound of Hope's shaky breathing, the subtle creak of the hardwood floor under her feet, and the faint rustle of the fabric swatches she had been clutching moments before, and in that silence, the magnitude of the confession began to ripple outward, like waves spreading across a still lake, touching everyone who had a stake in the tangled Forrester-Logan legacy, because a secret like this could not remain contained, not in a family where ambition, jealousy, and love were constantly colliding, not in a world where every revelation had consequences that could reverberate across boardrooms, bedrooms, and runways. And Brooke, feeling both terrified and oddly liberated, watched as Hope's mind raced, trying to comprehend that her life, the very foundation of her identity, the relationships she had built, the choices she thought were hers alone, had been based on a half-truth, a carefully constructed narrative that obscured who she really was, and Brooke wanted to reassure her, to take her hand, to tell her that despite the deception, despite the years of manipulation and secrecy, she was still the same Hope, still the daughter she had always loved, still the woman capable of taking her rightful place in the Forrester dynasty. Yet words felt inadequate, insufficient against the enormity of what had been revealed, and as Hope struggled to articulate her feelings, as if her mind were a storm of questions, accusations, relief, and fear all tangled together, Brooke realized that the real work had only just begun, that the fallout of this revelation would extend far beyond the walls of this sunlit room, beyond the careful calm of a single mother-daughter conversation, and into every aspect of the Forrester-Logan universe, because when bloodlines, love, and legacy collided, the resulting chaos was unstoppable. Ridge, who had been pacing just outside the room, was the first to react, his tall frame rigid with tension, jaw clenched, eyes flashing with a combination of disbelief, anger, and hurt, And when he finally stepped inside, voice low and controlled but seething with suppressed emotion, he demanded, "Brooke, what are you saying? Are you telling me that Hope, my daughter, she's not who I thought she was? That she's a Forrester?" Brooke's throat tightened, her chest heaving with the effort of maintaining composure as she nodded, and the words, once spoken, seemed to hang between them like an invisible barrier, an unbreachable wall of truth that neither could ignore, and Ridge's hands shook slightly as he ran them through his hair, a gesture that betrayed both his disbelief and his fear of the coming storm, because Ridge had spent decades trying to protect his family, trying to maintain the fragile equilibrium of love, loyalty, and ambition, and now that equilibrium had been shattered, leaving him to navigate a landscape where nothing was certain, where every alliance could be questioned, every intention second-guessed, and every relationship potentially destroyed by a revelation that was equal parts liberating and devastating. Hope, meanwhile, was struggling to process the emotional tornado swirling inside her, trying to reconcile the woman she had always admired as her mother with the truth of this monumental revelation, and as she stepped closer to Brooke, voice trembling, eyes wide with both fear and awe, she asked, "But, Mom, how? Why wasn't I told sooner? All these years. I could have known. I could have understood who I really am. Why hide this from me?" Brooke felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, because the question was not just fair, it was inevitable, a culmination of years of silence, guilt, and decisions made with the best of intentions but disastrous consequences, and she took a deep breath, knowing that the honesty Hope needed now would be both painful and necessary, and she said, "Hope, I wanted to protect you. I wanted you to have a normal life, to grow up without the weight of the family legacy pressing down on you, without the endless drama that comes with being a Forrester, but hiding the truth. It was a mistake, and I am so sorry that you had to find out this way, that you had to discover it all at once, because the truth, it should have been yours from the beginning." Liam, who had entered the room quietly behind Ridge, froze mid-step, his eyes narrowing as the pieces of Brooke's confession started to sink in, because for him, Hope's identity had always been intertwined with love, loyalty, and family, and suddenly everything shifted, leaving him unsure of where he stood, unsure of how to navigate the new reality, and he muttered almost under his breath, "So all this time, everything I thought I knew, it's different?" Brooke nodded again, the weight of the truth pressing down on her like a physical force, and Liam's face twisted with a mixture of confusion, disbelief, and growing concern because in the world of the Forresters, identity was not merely personal, it was tied to power, influence, and legacy, and Hope's revelation threatened to destabilize everything he had ever believed about family, destiny, and love. Thomas, who had been observing from the shadows with his trademark calculating gaze, smirked slightly, the gears turning in his mind as he considered the implications, because in his ambitious and often manipulative world, Hope's newfound status as the true Forrester was not just news. It was an opportunity, a lever to exploit, a card to play in the endless game of love, rivalry, and corporate dominance, and as he stepped forward, voice deceptively calm, he remarked, "Well, this changes things. Quite a bit, actually." And the room seemed to shrink, the tension thickening as his words hinted at the inevitable scheming and maneuvering that would follow, because in a family where secrets, lies, and ambition were currency, every revelation was a chance to gain advantage, and Thomas had always been quick to recognize opportunity in chaos. Steffi, who had entered moments later, eyes wide with suspicion and anger, could barely contain herself, her mind racing as she tried to process how this revelation affected her position, her relationships, and her future, and she snapped, voice sharp and incredulous, "Wait, are you saying Hope, my cousin, she's the real Forrester? Brooke, how could you? Why would you hide this?" Brooke's face tightened with both resolve and sorrow, because she knew that Steffi's reaction was not born of malice alone but of shock, betrayal, and the instinct to protect her own place in a family that had always been fiercely competitive, and Brooke responded, gently but firmly, "Steffi, it was never about taking anything from you. It was about protecting Hope, about giving her a chance to grow without the pressure of legacy. But the truth is out now, and we all have to face it together." The room was thick with tension, emotions colliding in a high-stakes mix of shock, anger, awe, and disbelief, and Brooke could see that this was only the beginning, that the ripple effect of her confession would spread far and wide, from board meetings at Forrester Creations to private conversations in bedrooms and living rooms, from confrontations in the studio to whispered arguments at the cafe where the family often gathered, because when the truth about Hope being the real Forrester became Public, there would be no escaping the consequences, no hiding from the fallout, and yet, despite the chaos that was inevitable, Brooke felt a strange sense of relief, knowing that the secret she had carried for so long was finally out, and that Hope could finally step into her true identity, fully and unapologetically. Hope, still grappling with the shock, felt a surge of emotion she could barely name: betrayal, confusion, pride, awe, and fear all tangled together, and she turned to Brooke, voice trembling. "So all those times, all the things I thought I knew about myself, about who I was, none of it was real?" Brooke shook her head gently, tears spilling freely now. "No, Hope. You are real. You are the same amazing, talented, compassionate woman you have always been. But now you know the truth. You are a Forrester, in every sense that matters, and you have a legacy, a family, and a future that's yours to embrace." Ridge, still visibly shaken, took a deep breath, trying to reconcile the father he had always believed he was with the new reality, because in his heart, he had always known that identity was complicated, that love and loyalty were never simple, and now he faced the challenge of supporting his daughter in her newfound truth while navigating the inevitable fallout that would engulf the family, the company, and the relationships that had long defined their lives. Liam, ever protective of Hope, reached out, hand steadying hers, eyes full of concern and determination, because he knew that the world could be cruel, manipulative, and unforgiving, but he also knew that Hope's strength, intelligence, and resilience were unmatched, and he would stand by her, no matter the storm that was coming. Thomas, ever opportunistic, smiled faintly, already plotting, calculating the ways in which this revelation could be leveraged, while Steffi struggled with feelings of inadequacy, jealousy, and fear of losing her place in a world where identity and legacy were currency, and Brooke, observing the emotional turbulence, realized that she had set in motion a chain reaction that could either heal or destroy the family, but it was necessary because secrets, no matter how well-intentioned, always carried a cost, and the cost of silence was far greater than the cost of truth. And as she watched Hope process the revelation, the subtle shift in posture, the glint of pride mingled with awe in her eyes, Brooke knew that despite the upheaval, her daughter was ready to embrace her legacy, to claim her place as the true Forrester, and to navigate the treacherous waters of love, rivalry, ambition, and family loyalty with the same grace, intelligence, and courage that had always defined her. And in that moment, surrounded by the whirlwind of emotions, conflicts, and possibilities, Brooke felt the weight of decades of secrecy lift from her shoulders, replaced by hope, resilience, and the knowledge that sometimes, revealing the truth, no matter how explosive, was the only path toward freedom, love, and true family. As the silence lingered, broken only by the occasional intake of breath or the faint shuffle of feet, the weight of Brooke's confession began to press on everyone in the room, making the air almost unbearable with tension. Hope, still reeling from the revelation, felt her mind spin in dizzying circles, trying to reconcile the mother who had nurtured and guided her with the shocking truth that she had been kept from, a truth that redefined her identity and everything she thought she knew about her family. Ridge, pacing the floor with restless energy, ran his hands through his hair again, muttering under his breath about responsibility, loyalty, and the impossible task of reconciling past choices with present realities. Liam, his protective instincts flaring, stepped closer to Hope, wrapping an arm around her shoulders, his gaze darting between Brooke and Ridge, silently communicating that he would be her anchor in this storm, that no matter how the Forrester world reacted, she would not face it alone. Steffi, on the other hand, was visibly shaken but also simmering with suppressed anger, her mind already spinning through scenarios where her own ambitions and relationships could be jeopardized, her eyes narrowing at Hope with a mix of jealousy and disbelief, unable to hide the way her carefully constructed sense of control over her life and the family dynamics now felt threatened. Thomas, ever opportunistic, leaned slightly against the wall, a calculating smile playing at the corner of his lips, his mind racing through every way he could exploit this upheaval, manipulate emotions, and gain leverage in the next wave of drama. Even Ridge, whose protective instincts for his children were legendary, felt the tremor of uncertainty ripple through his mind, wondering how this revelation would reshape alliances, loyalties, and ambitions within the family. Brooke, sensing the tidal wave of emotion she had unleashed, reached out, voice steady but soft, trying to calm the storm she had set in motion. "This isn't about anyone losing their place," she said carefully, her eyes moving from Hope to Ridge, Liam, Steffi, and Thomas. "It's about the truth, And it's about Hope finally knowing who she really is. We have to face this together. As a family. Hope looked up at her mother, tears still glistening in her eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. Mom, I don't know what to feel. I'm happy, I guess, but it's so much all at once. Brooke nodded, placing a comforting hand on her daughter's cheek, knowing that this was only the beginning of a storm that would ripple through every part of their lives, but also believing that the revelation, though explosive, could ultimately bring them closer, strengthen their bonds, and set Hope on the path she was always meant to follow. As the real Forrester, a truth that could no longer be denied or hidden.